Welcome everyone to another episode of Open Book Broadcast, where we talk about anything and everything writing and publishing, and we are an open book about it. I am your host, Allie, with The Right Place, Right Time, which is my virtual boutique of ghostwriting and writing coaching services for badass and brilliant people ready to brave the path to the page. I am so excited today to have my guest, Donna Mazzitelli of Writing with Donna and Merry Dissonance Press. Now, let me go ahead and properly introduce Donna before I officially welcome her in and we just jump right into it. So Donna is the founder of Writing with Donna and Merry Dissonance Press. As a writing coach and editor, Donna helps writers connect to their unique core voice so they can share a message that is crafted with heart. Believing in the magic of our shared human experiences, as a publisher, she focuses on works of transformation, inspiration, exploration, and illumination. Her first memoir, Mosaic Heart, Pieces of an Unfinished Life, was released on Valentine's Day of 2022. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Allie. So good to be here. Thank you.
And I'm so glad that you are here with me. So, Donna, let's just start with kind of a softball question. Tell us a little bit about you, not the business stuff, because we're going to spend the whole time talking about that.
Well, let's see. What else can I say? I am a mom of twin girls. Actually, I had three girls. I lost my eldest daughter in 2019. I have twin girls who are 27 years old, and grandchildren, and a great grandchild. And I love paddleboarding, and I love to go bike riding, so walking. I love reading, of course, and writing and journaling. So that's kind of how I spend my time.
Oh my gosh. Well, welcome, Donna. I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter's passing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Donna, we have so many things to cover because we've got the writing coach aspect, we have the editor's aspect, we have the publishing aspect, and we have the author aspect. I mean, you're just like, you're the one-stop shop for all things writing and publishing. So, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So why don't we just start with, I always love to hear people's like origin stories of how their businesses began. Now, you have both Writing with Donna and Merry Dissonance Press. So I don't know if those stories are connected or if they're separate, but tell us how this began.
Cool. So yeah, they actually one came after the other. So Writing with Donna, actually, I started back in 2010, 2011, during that time frame officially. So, and how did I get into it? I mean, that's kind of a magical story, and that is that I took part in a women's anthology and submitted a story actually about my eldest daughter's, actually my first story was about my first experience with cancer. And then they did a year 2 anthology, and I did the story of my eldest daughter's adoption, of how she came into our lives. And then by the time during year 2, I said, it came out of my mouth from nowhere, hey, if anybody's having trouble with their story, I'd be happy to help them. And I don't even know where that came from. So just kind of came out of my mouth, and they took me up on it. And so I helped with a few women's stories. And then the following year, I actually edited the entire anthology. And by then, I had started editing this. These two women started a self-publishing company, and they asked me if I would be a contract editor for them. I was like, I don't know. I mean, I've never been an editor. That's not my background. Yeah. Anyway, but they saw something that I couldn't recognize in myself yet, and that's how it began. And then by 2000, and then I officially hung up my shingle as Writing with Donna. And then by 2013, because of where publishing was 10 years ago, it's like it was very different than it is now. And I saw as a hybrid publisher that I could give people options in terms of paper and size of books, and things that at that time CreateSpace didn't offer people. So I could then go with Ingram and publish for people. And the other part of it is I wanted to do a structure that was very different than anything I'd heard of, and that was that I wanted my authors to get 100% of their royalties, and they still today. That's how I have it set up. So I don't collect any royalties. I get paid on the front end along with my contractors. So that's how it all came to be. So yeah, so then all of a sudden I'm all things, all things.
My gosh. I love it. I love it so much because there was something that you said in your story that I think is so true for so many of us if we really think back, and that's having other supportive people who see something in us that we don't yet see in
Yes,
ourselves,
yes,
and that their belief is like the little like it's like igniting the flame of confidence, and then you finally grow it yourself and you can see it in yourself, and then you can like take off from the moon, and you clearly have.
absolutely. Thank you. Well, and the other
Yeah.
piece is for a while I called myself the wordsmith. I mean, which a lot of people call themselves a lot of editors call themselves the wordsmith. But there was something that it was like, no, that's not really it. And I was brainstorming with a friend. We were at a writing retreat, and it was like I came up with I'm the word heartiste because it's artistry, but it's from heart. It's from heart and intuition is how I work. So it's like I bring knowledge, but there's also this intuitive knowing that comes online, and my heart being able to meet people, especially in memoir, being able to
Yeah.
meet people in their stories with what they've gone through and be able to walk through that with them, through take us through your story even to the depths of it and then bring us back out into the light. And I have that ability to do that with people. And I not everybody can do that. I recognize now. I didn't
Yeah.
know that then, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, memoir is a very specific, genre, and I think it requires not just a specific ability on the writer's part, but I think that on a coach's part that's working on memoir specifically, right? You have to have, very specific skills, and I think you're touching on some of them, right? Like that intuition,
Right.
compassion, empathy. Um, you know, uh,
Absolutely.
I like to call it like the ability to be in the trenches,
Yes.
because memoir is not light. It can get light, it can get lighter, and there's ways to do it in a funny way, like Jenny Lawson is brilliant at it. But it's not usually that you're talking about sunshines and ponies and rainbows.
Right.
Memoir is about the dark stuff, so you have to have a certain ability to sit with that and to tease
Yeah.
it out. So let's talk about that then. So why don't we talk about what would you say to somebody, like if they're wondering if it's time to write their story? How do they decide that? And then why would you say to somebody that they should write their story?
Hmm. That the second question there is, I mean, how many people, I hear it all the time, like people will say, oh, I've been told over and over that I need to tell my story. So, I'm thinking about maybe I do have to write my story. But I think, so I'm going to answer that question first. I think it's got to be that I want to write my story. I mean, it really has to start there,
Yeah.
no matter what others are saying about it. So it's like, if somebody has this, like just this whisper or even a louder voice coming in saying, I need to write, I need to write, I need to tell this story, I think then it's something that you really have to consider. There's something at play there that needs to, that needs to be recognized and looked at. And as far as the when, that's always tricky because we are not ever done. Like we're unfinished until the end of our lives. So because we're works in progress, it's like, when is the time to tell my story? When's the time to write my memoir? And I think it has to be looking at, where are you in your own path of healing, in your own path of understanding what you've been through, in your own path of taking something, life experience or life experiences, or a situation that you are at least at a place where you can have some introspection, where you can still go back and relive it in a sense and be able to write from that place, but also from an introspective place. So, and that's a balancing act. And so I, as the coach and as an editor, am going to look at that in terms of, what the writing, where are you in that space, in terms of, if there's something, it's going to come through. If there's something that's big, that's unresolved, it's going to come through in the writing. So then it's looking at, is there a way to get to a place of more resolve, or is it okay to write that part and leave it where it is? um, and so it's hard to define that. It's just, I think if the urge is there, if the urge to write is there, you got to write. And I tell people all the time, and I know for myself, you write first for yourself. I wrote first for myself. You write first for yourself. Then, as we go back through the refinement, now we write it, we tweak it in ways to make sure that it's going to serve the reader as well.
Right.
So, and that's not censoring at all. That's not about that. It's definitely about what do I need to do to refine it so that the reader can really be here with me in my story and really glean something from it. So, yeah, that's kind of.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
You used the word artiste earlier, and I use something different when I'm working with people or trying to explain things, and I say that the heart of memoir is healing first before you can turn it into art. So HE and is for healing, and then art for turning it into something that somebody else can relate to, or somebody else wants to purchase, depending on how you're publishing. So we're definitely on the same wavelength. That
Beautiful.
Healing and recovery is like definitely a part of it. Now, have you ever worked with somebody who you've started with and then has had to take like a big pause in a project because they've needed to go and kind of resolve something before they can actually, craft it into something compelling?
Right. Well, two examples come up and they didn't exactly turn out the way you're describing. I mean, one, it was like there were parts in her story that I just felt were unresolved, and there was so much anger that was coming in to the story, so much anger and blame as to there was a lot of victimization in it. And so I suggested that either, there was more work to be done around it, and I of course didn't say it that way, but it was, this is an area that obviously is still hurts a lot, and so maybe it's to spend time with it to see if there's a way to kind of heal that wounding. Otherwise, could you leave that part of your story out because it was not the critical part of the story. It was not essential to the book, to be honest. And she couldn't let it. Ultimately, she couldn't let it go. And so, as an editor, and I was her editor, I did not publish the book. I had to. It always is the author's final say. So, I did my part to show it to her and talk with her about it, and then it was her decision. So she left it in. And the other person I can think of, it was a husband and wife writing a book together, and it was a very painful experience they had been through. And there was not the emotionality of the story was pretty absent. And so, as I went through it as a developmental editor, I really pointed out the places where, it just felt like they weren't even in the scene at times. So it was like, we want to hear, what was happening for you at this time. It took them a year to do a rewrite of the book. So, because it was very, very emotional to actually go back and sit with the pain of what they had gone through. And that can happen. So I don't put a time, I tell people on memoir, especially, not to put a timeline, not to make it that I've got to have it published by a certain date, if at all possible. Set an intention, but at the same time, know that there may be times that you really do have to pause or, really re-experience something. And then there's more healing to happen. There's more understanding to come to before you can even get it written.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to tell people, the world doesn't know that this book is coming, so it's okay to wait a little longer. Like, there's no urgency. Nobody is expecting it. Like, this is still in your court, right? Like, especially if you don't have a deal, right, with a publisher, with a deadline, and, like, it's in your domain, and do what you need to do to make it the book that you're going to be proud of on the other side. So take the time, like, chill out. Yeah, it'll still be there, and it'll be better when you've gone through all of the right steps to make it so.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I love that.
Okay. So you mentioned a couple of things in there that I wanted to touch on. So, you mentioned developmental editing. So what I would love for you to share with us are the types of editing, because this trips up people, especially when they're new to writing a book all the time. The types of editing, and then like what you specifically love to do as an editor, and how that's useful to a client.
Okay. So, well, from my perspective, there's there's three levels of editing that are an absolute must. I mean, I know if somebody were to go to a traditional publisher, they actually do more levels of editing and more, bring more people in to look at the book from different perspectives. So, but in the world where somebody's paying for these services themselves, to me, it's like there's 3 levels of editing that are an absolute must. And the first is developmental editing, and that's like really looking at the content and the flow and the pacing and the story arc and the development of the characters and scenes. Because sometimes I'm working on fiction, but even in memoir, it's like how are you bringing these scenes to life for us? Um, all of those aspects, the tone, all of that comes through the developmental edit. Then it goes back to the author for the rewrite, and that's the toughest one, as the writer, having to go back through that, because that's the one where there's really considerations in terms of what stays in, what might go out, what needs to be expanded on, what needs to be maybe less focused on, all of those kinds of decisions, moving things around, oftentimes. And I might suggest and offer that in as part of that edit, but usually I let the author at the developmental stage make those decisions with recommendations, of course. And then the second edit is line edit, and some people call it copy edit. I call it line edit, line editing, because it's in the book world, it just seems like that's the better definition of it. But it's really then taking it line. I go back through it actually twice at that point. Well, in the developmental edit and the line edit, I read the manuscript 2 times. And so the line edit, I'm looking at it developmentally first to see what's happened with the story. And then I go back through it, line editing, offering and track changes. I use track changes, offering suggestions as to what could be tweaked, in terms if there's a repetition of words, if there's sentences that seem out of order, all of those kinds of decisions. And all of that's offered in track changes, so an author can decide to keep it or not. And then the third level is proofreading, and I don't do that. I have an independent proofreader that I work with. So I get the manuscript all cleaned up for the proofreader and then give it to her. And then she gives it back to me in track changes. And then she uses Chicago Manual of Style as her guide. But sometimes, we go against those rules, because it's part of the author's voicing. And so I will look at those kinds of decisions to decide whether, this needs to stay or needs to change per, the style manual. So that's those are the 3 levels. And so, so I do the first 2, but I do not want to proofread. And plus, I know we need another set of eyes. By then, I am so intimately involved in that story, I lose perspective as well. So we need fresh eyes. Yeah.
Now, when you enter into an engagement with a client, do they ever request that if you're going to do the developmental edit, you don't do the line edit, or that they want somebody else to do the developmental edit and you're going to do the line edit? Like, what does that kind of relationship look like?
So I've just had this happen recently, where actually just like a month ago, where I had somebody who she wrote a fiction novel a few years ago, or some years ago, and at the time I wasn't available when she needed the line edit done, and so I had done the developmental edit. So she brought another editor in to do the line edit, and it worked really well. So, and he was also a man, and it's romance, and so she liked what turned out, that she had my perspective, and then she had his perspective going through the line edit. So her second book, she decided she wanted to take that approach from the get-go, just make it clear. So I've just done the developmental edit, and then he'll do the line edit. It's a little strange for me because I really do I get attached. And so I want to see what happens with the story. But I'm like, this is what works for her, and I'm here to serve. So, it's like, okay, I did my part, and I'm available to her if she wants to flush out any of the recommendations or, the questions I've posed. And then, because he won't have that perspective yet, he won't have read it. So, and then otherwise I have to let it go. So, yeah. And so it's good practice in letting go. It seems to be a life lesson.
Right?
Yeah. So, but I've never had it go the other way. So, and I don't think, because of how much I like control, there's another piece. I can't really let go of the developmental edit. It's like that to me. I actually can't look at a book starting from a line edit. I can't get my head there to start there. If I haven't read something, I'm looking at it developmentally from the beginning. And there's usually opportunity. I haven't come across one where there wasn't opportunity for some developmental changes. Yeah.
Right. So now when somebody wants to work with you as a writing coach, is that entirely separate from the developmental editing, or is that combined? Like, how do you distinguish that for what a client needs? So if they come to you and they're like, hey, Donna, I don't know what you do. Explain it to me. Like, how are these different avenues kind of laid out for them?
So coaching, I mean, usually somebody either has some of their writing already done or nothing started, right? So it's like they don't have a complete manuscript yet.
Okay.
So as a coach, then we decide what the process will be for whether whether we're going to take it like chapter by chapter, and I'm going to give them feedback along the way, or if I'm going to do like a review of some writing and then give feedback. So coaching is a bit different. And if I start from the beginning, we really start with looking at the purpose of their book, who they are, why they're writing it, what is it that they're writing, who's this going to be for, what's the core message of their book. We're going to look at all those foundational pieces, and then come up with, I call it story webbing, which is like mind mapping, but we're going to come up with like the buckets of what is going to go into this book and get really this soft outline started. And then we decide on a process going forward of how it's going to be written, and how I'm going to be involved. So, some people will decide after those sessions that they want to just go off and write on their own. And then, I'll come in as editor down the road. Some people want that feedback as they're going, or, just want input, or some people want just accountability. So as a coach, I play all different roles depending on what is going to serve the client to get their story written. And when I give feedback as a coach, I guess you can consider it more like I'm reviewing. So I am giving it is from an editing perspective, but it's very high level. I'm looking at is everything here that needs to be here in the content? So it is content, but I consider it more like it's more like a manuscript, what I would call a manuscript review, but I'm doing it as chapter by chapter, giving back. Okay. So I keep the coaching and the editing separate. Yeah.
Okay. Now, so somebody could theoretically, though, start with you as a coach, then work with you as an editor, right? And then, where does Merry Dissonance Press fit into this? Let's spend a couple minutes talking about your press.
Yes. So if people come to me, a lot of my clients come to me through a group that I work with that helps people self-publish. And so if clients come to me through that group, then I don't ever talk to them about publishing, because they're already usually signed up with that group by the time. And if they're not, if I'm coming in as coach, they haven't signed up, but at the same time, that's probably the way they're going to go, is self-publish their book. So I don't try to talk to them about working with me. If somebody comes to as a publisher, but if somebody comes to me and they don't know where they're going to go with publishing, I like to see where we go in terms of our relationship through the writing or editing of the book or editing. And then also, where does the book land? And then also, what is the book about? What's the message of the book? And usually by the time we get to line editing, that's when I might say, we can start talking about this. I don't want to talk about it sooner, because I really first of all, I want them to focus on their writing and not be worried about the publishing piece of it. And then also, like I said, I want to see where our relationship goes, because if it's a very collaborative relationship where we've really built this trust between us, and the book is really turning into this beautiful, story, whatever it's going to, be, then, and the messaging is something that, if I think about what my press is about, and it's like to bring more connection, to bring more light into the world, to, maybe have us think outside of the box. It's like it's to stretch people and to help us, help us see our connection and see our humanity in each other. So if that story or that, that book fits in there, then I'm going to, ask, hey, can we start talking about this? If they haven't already brought it up. A lot of times they've brought it up. So, yeah.
And is there a specific type of book? Does Merry Dissonance Press focus on a particular genre or on a particular author or set of stories, or, you know, how do you focus what the press publishes?
It's really more, it's not a specific genre. I would say memoir is definitely up there at the top because, you know, memoir is all about connection and seeing, you know, seeing ourselves in each other. Um, if it's personal growth and development where there's woven in, that would be something that I would definitely look at for the press. How-to books are not going to be probably, I mean, they're not going to be what I'm going to focus on. There really has to be an element of story, of personal or client stories or something that comes into the book. I also have published memoir, I'm sorry, non, no, let me back up. Have published fiction and but visionary fiction, and also children's books. So it's really, is there something that is going to stretch us in terms of how we see society? Is there something that's going to be a gift to humanity in some way? Um, is there something that's going to help us think about our responsibility to each other, to our planet, to the world at large? Those are the things that I'm going to look at in terms of, you know, the kinds of books that I want to publish. And then what's the quality of the writing? At the end of the day, what's the quality? Is this a book that I think could be award winning, that, you know, that where the person wants to invest in creating the highest quality book they can? Those are going to be people I want to work with. If somebody really you know, needs to do it in a way that they really can't invest a lot of money in, and I understand and respect that, then I'm not going to be the place, you know, to publish. So I have made exceptions, I will tell you that, but depending on what the book is about and, you know, who the author is and that kind of stuff. But normally it's going to be that they have to be at a point that they really want to invest in their book themselves and really have the highest quality book that they could have.
Yeah, beautiful. So for those who are catching this live or in replay, I have put links to Donna's Writing with Donna site as well as Merry Dissonance Press, so you can get more information about working with Donna as an editor, a coach, or with her press. But before we wrap up, Donna, you have a book, and we've got to talk about that. So I want to hear about Mosaic Heart, and I especially want to hear if there was anything that surprised you about writing your own book, given that you were obviously an expert in all of the things. But like, what might have been surprising when you were actually sitting in the author's seat?
Yeah. So anyway, my book is called Mosaic Heart, Pieces of an Unfinished Life, and I actually have it here, so I'll show you the cover. So this was, as you said, it was published on Valentine's Day because that is a significant part of my story is events that happen on Valentine's Day. And so it is my journey of being diagnosed with breast cancer in 2007 and then having a second surprise diagnosis of a different cancer in 2014. But and I'm sorry, I'm in the dark all of a sudden, not quite sure what's happening there. But it is not only about cancer, but it's really about, you know, what happens within my marriage, what happens within my professional life, everything that takes place, and how cancer is like instrumental in me, in my evolution as a person. And I go from this place of being in total fear and anxiety and trying to control everything, because that's part of my MO, and to really having to completely surrender and embrace everything, and how cancer became really my biggest teacher, my greatest ally. And I don't see it as an enemy. I don't see it as something to be battled. So my story is all about that, how you know, how that evolution took place. What surprised me, and well, it took me a long time to write it. I started writing it 2008. I did not think that it was going to encompass a second cancer. So the story arc was totally different initially, and I had to actually reshape the story arc. That was huge, and it actually took me to my knees for a while because it was like my whole idea of how the book was going to go, where it was going to land, completely changed. So that was huge. And then I would say, as you know, being in the author's seat, the biggest thing is getting to that place I saw how I knew this, and I respect and honor this when I'm working with clients, but to live it and get to the place of that vulnerability that comes online when you have to pass your manuscript to somebody else, to an editor, and have that editor, give you feedback, and not knowing, what feedback you're going to get. I held on for a long time before I would pass it on. I kept going over it, trying to get it, like massage it more and more before I ever passed it on. I was so afraid of that, like that I was going to be judged. And it so surprised me because I don't judge others when I'm working with them. And yet all of that fear and everything came up. It was huge. So, and then that whole piece of is my story worthy of the light of day? Is anybody going to read it? All of that, those things that I talk to authors about, it just all came to life, and I had to work through all of that myself. So I now have a even bigger appreciation, not only from up here, but from what, in my heart, of what this experience is like when we are putting this baby out into the world, birthing it into the world. It's big. It's huge.
Yeah. I think, we all struggle with fear and self-doubt and imposter syndrome, no
Oh, yeah.
matter what our expertise or brilliance is. When it's us on the line, it's different because we're our own worst critic, right? Like we will always be that, our own worst critic. And so we might have all of the compassion and empathy and grace for the people that we work with that have gone through all of these things, but when it comes to us having to then turn it inward, it's like, ooh, it's like grit teeth and like, clenched fists. But it seems like you've had a wonderful response to Mosaic Heart, and you've got big things planned. And do you want to tell us anything about like what it's been like since the book has been out there in the world?
Thank you. Well, it has, I mean, I have gotten wonderful feedback. I've actually, to me, the biggest honor is when some readers have said, I want to get a copy of the book for so-and-so. This person, is going through cancer, or and my story, I don't expect it to be only for those going through cancer. I hope that it's going to be a story that can be inspirational for anybody going through any type, dark night of the soul experience. But I've actually had people specifically ask for, get copies of the book that they want to give to somebody who'd had a recent experience or is experiencing. And so to me, that's that's just such an honor that it really is serving in that way, in a way that I didn't quite expect, actually, to be honest. I didn't expect that it would be where those going through the experience themselves would read the book and glean something from it as they're going through, cancer experience themselves. So a book takes on a life of its own. I always say that. And so it's starting to show me that it's going to go places that I, didn't necessarily expect, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, and last night actually was the SEPA EVI Awards in Colorado, the Colorado Independent Publishers Awards, and my book was a finalist for motivational, inspirational, and I received a bronze award for it. So it definitely is also being acknowledged for the writing as well as what the content is about. So so it's thrilling. It really is thrilling.
Congratulations on all the success. So I popped Donna's the name of the book in the comments, and you can find Mosaic Heart, Pieces of an Unfinished Life, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, and also some local independent bookstores, I'm guessing in Donna's area. I'm going to put a huge plug in for bookshop.org because you're supporting indie bookstores. And that's a really huge and important thing right now in the industry, I think, personally. Just putting in my personal opinion there on supporting indie bookstores.
Exactly. Can I say one other plug? Also, I have a link to indiebound.org, and that is also because if you can order my book at any bookstore. So if you go to indiebound.org, you can find your local bookstore where's the closest bookstore to you, and then you can actually order it. So it won't be on their shelves, but you could actually have them order it on your behalf. So
all right,
it's
I'm going to put
pretty
that
cool
in the comments as well.
And that also supports indie stores.
Okay.
So yeah.
indiebound.org.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to throw that into the comments for folks as well. So people know where to connect with Donna, because I put those links in the comments, where to find Donna's book. Donna, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience before we wrap up today's open book broadcast?
I just will say that if anybody out there has that urge that, I need to tell my story, because I think it will serve others as well as, serve me, to please do it. Because I think that more than ever, it's our stories that are going to heal us and our planet. It's our connection to each other. So please, please, please don't silence that voice. If you really feel that urging, please listen. And whether you have Allie ghost write it for you, or write it yourself, it's like there are ways to get your story out no matter what. So that would be it. Thank you.
Oh my God, preach. Okay, Donna's so my person. Yes, stories will heal us all. So speak and be heard. All right, Donna, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us today on Open Book Broadcast. Folks,
Thanks,
I'm going to be back again next Tuesday at 10:15 by myself this time. I have no idea what we're going to talk about just yet, but I will come up with it by next week. In the meantime, please visit therightplacerightTime.com. And until next time, have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.